I am your host, Sabine Diame of the Pathways to Power podcast. And I just thank you for your time. Thank you for coming here for yet another episode. If you're new here, I'm so glad that you came to join us. And for those who are returning, we so appreciate you and trusting myself and my guests for bringing you value and providing you all the information you need to start on your pathways to purpose as well as personal power. And so today I have an incredible guest. Her name is Esther McCant. Esther McCant is a doula, a master doula. She also is a mentor of doulas. And I'm just going to basically share some very important information on Esther and the incredible work that she does in the community. So, since 2015, Esther, who is the founder and CEO of Metro Mommy Agency, has been providing labor and postpartum support to hundreds of mothers during their birthing experiences here in South Florida and beyond. She provides childbirth education, breastfeeding support, and other postpartum doula support services. Another fun fact about Esther, and we'll get into more of the work that she's done, but she was also my doula twice. She supported me throughout both of my pregnancies as well as my labor and birth experiences and postpartum. And so she is not only a dear friend, but now family to both me and my husband, my kids. We just love her so much. And so I'm so honored that you came and joined us here. And feel free to share whatever I may have missed in your long resume of achievements.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Sabine. Honestly, you kind of hit it on the head. I think folks should know I am a Miami native, born and raised here, went to all of the feeder pattern schools in North Miami Beach, went to studied biology, thought that I was going to become a doctor. I wanted to be an anesthesiologist and I wanted to be like a radiologist at one point, and found myself on a path in the master's, program at FIU, wanting to do like public health. And so I did not complete my master's in public health. However, this work, called me. And I do believe it is a special calling to do this kind of work. And I still do a lot of public health work in this work because I'm really looking at the community and how we can improve the health of our community as it relates to maternal child health. So, yeah.
I love it. And there's been so much talk about the disparities between maternal health for Black and women of color versus our counterparts.
Right.
And so I can't wait for you to share those, maybe facts and information that you know about it and why it's so. So,
Definitely.
yes.
I look forward to it.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things to definitely recognize is I want to make sure that on this episode, we are not only just highlighting what we know to be the facts about why these disparities happen, but really come out feeling empowered and hopeful about what we can do about addressing it. Because we are doing some really interesting work to address it. So, yeah.
Yes, yes. All right. So I guess we can start off by sharing your thoughts on these systemic challenges. And like you said, there are definitely things that have been put in place to combat, some of those disparities. But for those who may not know, what are some of the challenges that are out there now?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the things to really understand is when we look at things like public health, a lot of the times there was a big focus on socioeconomic status being an indicator for why people have poor health outcomes. And that was kind of like the case as well. They would kind of like translate that over into maternal child health that, a Black mom may have experienced a poor outcome because, she was already obese or she already had the challenge of food insecurity and wasn't eating healthy. And so in the past, there was a lot of blame on Black people. And I think it was an effort to ignore the fact that systemically we have not had the best of treatment, right? When you think about way back when, but really wasn't that long ago, women delivering in, basements or not getting the care that they need or, birthing outside, not on purpose, but because that's where the slave masters wanted them to birth. There's a lot of history in our DNA and in our tissues. And I think at the core of it, reproductive justice advocates, we all agree that it is systemic racism. That's really a big cause to this. It even bleeds into our healthcare system and how doctors are trained. We know that doctors are often unaware of how to really address cultural contexts and, the different needs of different people. I've had a chance to speak to different providers, even here in South Florida, where it's very diverse.
Right.
The question of, well, how do I, make a patient who's Black and I'm white feel comfortable to be here? Right. And so it's those basic things of listen to them,
Yes.
actually address their needs, like understand that when they're asking for help, it's because they actually want it and they need it, and treat them the same. So we know that that has not been historically what's happened. And so we've seen, a decline, and we've seen resources taken out of communities where we know there's lots of Black people there. And unfortunately, that means a lot of the best care providers are not there either. So it's a lot that we could talk about all day and all night. But I want people to know we have to stop blaming, the people, and think about how we can change the way the systems are structured.
So as you were speaking, my mind went back to when I first met you. I don't even know if you remember this, but I believe it was back in 2018, 2017 or 2018. A good friend of both of ours, Feriel, she was holding a event. She had an organization called Her Perspective. And so she brought in a lot of very impactful women like yourself in the community to come and speak to, women seeking knowledge, seeking ways to empower ourselves. And I remember you came up and you spoke about the birth story. And at that time, I hadn't even met my husband. I knew I always wanted to be a mother, but motherhood wasn't really on my radar at that moment. And so when you mentioned birth story, I was like, I had already in my mind canceled myself out. I was like, I don't have nothing to do with this. This is not my field, So, and then you said something very key. You said, regardless if you have kids or not, everyone has a birth story. And I started thinking back on the stories that I heard from my mother, when she was having children, when she birthed me. I'm the oldest. And so I heard so many things about her birthing experience. And it just made me, from that point, start to think about, maybe I need to give this a little bit more thought, even if I'm not at the point to where I'm ready per se, or preparing in this very moment for a child. But it is something to think about. And you shared some things that day that I think really stuck with me throughout the years. And so it just made sense when it was now finally my time to have children. I reached back out to Furiel and she said, "You know what? Let me hook you up with my doula." And it just was, I think, a match made in heaven, because I knew, knowing things about myself and how difficult it could be even for me in everyday situations to advocate for myself. I knew, okay, I needed to put the odds in my favor and get someone who could advocate for me in a time that would be it would just be probably the most difficult time to find the courage and strength to advocate. So thank you. I want to go ahead and give you your flowers and say thank you for the work that you do and for what you've done, for me and my family.
Thank you, ma'am. My pleasure.
So in saying all of that, I would love to know what inspired you to pursue a career as a doula.
Yeah, definitely. I would say it was my birth stories. I have 4 boys. I had 5 pregnancies. My first pregnancy actually resulted in a miscarriage. I actually miscarried in the hospital after just feeling like, okay, this is too much. Can't do this at home. My husband at the time was like, let's go. What is going on? And I miscarried in the hospital, but I just remember the interaction I had with the doctor that finally came in an hour later, like after I was already laid out, already past what was called a blighted ovum. And she was just so rude. The white woman comes in and she's like, "You need a DNC or else you're going to bleed out. You can die." And I'm just like, do you not know what just happened? Just no empathy. And I just kind of vowed, I was like, I'm not birthing here. Like, if I get pregnant again, I'm not having it here. And so I ended up finding a midwife locally, Janice Heller, who delivered 3 of my 4 boys. And then it was baby number 3 with my third born, Jonas, where I didn't live in Florida at the time, where we have the luxury of having all types of midwives who can care for us here and insurance will cover it. I was in Alabama, where, we still have in Alabama 2024, right? Or whenever you're hearing this, it's still probably a struggle in Alabama for people to have out of hospital births. And so that was the case for me. I had to research, where can I do this, and found out people leave the state to actually go and give birth. And so that's what I did. I found a wonderful midwife in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay,
And
up the
so
street.
that birth was 2.5 hours away, but worth every second, 6 hour labor. Fantastic experience. And it was that midwife asking the right questions, right? Which is probably why I want to become a midwife. I love being inquisitive and learning more about people. And she asked the right question. She asked me, what's going on? Because I came in distraught. I'm like, I have 3 kids, like under 6. Like, what am I doing with my life? I thought I was going to be a doctor. Thought I was going to do all these things. And so I came in distraught, and she's like, well, what do you really enjoy? Like, what do you love to do? And I was like, I love talking to women. I love kicking it at the playground and hearing birth stories and just really holding space for people in that way. And she said, you should think about becoming a doula or a midwife or a childbirth educator. And so I did the doula route first. Yeah, that's what made sense.
First. So we know that the midwife is coming, and you already are a childbirth educator as well.
Yeah, I'm also a trained midwife assistant as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that story. And it was while you were sharing the story, something came to mind where I was just thinking about how so many women, because you shared your experience of losing a child, and it sounded like were you full term, or
I was 8 weeks.
okay,
Well, probably about 10 weeks. 10 weeks.
okay.
Yeah.
And what I've heard in many people's experiences, that no matter how long, it some of those, I guess, feelings of loss, the grief, the grieving process, the mourning process is very much the same. And so, and to know that you're going into a hospital and it's just like, business as usual for the doctor, I could only imagine what that feels like.
Yeah.
And so, how long from that point to the time you decided to, like, how much time had passed from the time you decided, okay, I'm gonna do this?
3 babies later. So
Okay.
my firstborn was born in 2011.
Okay.
And then I wanted to become a doula back in 2015. So after I had my third born, he was born in 2014.
So it pretty much, in a negative way, almost planted the seed for who you are now.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even say negative. I think I needed to see that where I would say, quote unquote, the stakes are low, right? I think it's a lot more dangerous to go that far, even emotionally, and just, to go further into the pregnancy and to experience a loss like that. I think it was right on time. So that's the silver lining I see.
I love that optimism. Everything, we always hear everything happens for a reason, but I think that it's on us to like decide, okay, what can we pick from this situation, whether it may seem negative or positive on the outside looking in, like what can we learn from what happened, and find our power in that. And you definitely did, in empowering other women, other families, children. So again, thank you for what you do.
I mean, I will say this because I couldn't just do it on my own. And I do want to say, for anyone who's experienced loss, it is a grieving process. I don't think it should be undertaken alone. I did have the comfort of, folks who were counseling me after I found out from that ultrasound that a loss would happen. And I think that really gave me a lot of like courage to just get through the next phase, so just definitely want to throw that out there too. Yeah, definitely get support.
And there are therapists I know that specialize just in maternal health.
Yep.
And so that's very important, that I guess throughout the whole process, no matter how the birth is going or pregnancy is going, to seek that help if you can. So I would love to know, we've heard a lot of, ups and downs with your experience, but also your path to becoming a doula. What would you say you love most about being a doula?
So having experienced, 4 like unmedicated births, I could tell you it is the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. And I would venture to say for most women, that would also be the same. Yes. Right? Would you say so? Would you say so?
Yes.
Yes. The hardest thing ever. But I love the transformative like experience and process of walking alongside someone and believing, sometimes even more than they do, that they can get through this very thing, right? That on the other side, they literally come out, taking back their power. They come back and they're a different person, you know, and I love being able to watch that. For some of my moms, I'm like with them on their first experience,
Right.
which is kind of what happened with you. And
Yeah.
so I get to see, hey, now you are a woman. I mean, you're already a mom because you're carrying, but to see that transition, it's like this rite of passage. It's
Yes.
like this going under, not a knife, because ideally we want to avoid a cesarean, but if a cesarean has to happen, it's going under a knife. It's going under like layers of history, your ancestry. Just it's a spiritual experience to give birth. And I just think that people should honor that. And I love being around. I get teared up thinking about it because it's a very sacred thing that I've been honored to be around so many. Like even today, I got a card in the mail of a family. She did end up having a cesarean, and even that process of wow, it's not the outcome we expected, not necessarily what we wanted, but you got so much joy and power out of this. I mean, I just love seeing the card and seeing the little boy like already old enough to stand and walk and enjoy his, second Christmas. That's why I do this work.
Wow. So, oh my gosh, I really love what you shared about, just being along that path. And I remember in my own experience, I kind of wanted to do this in a particular order, but you brought up, that you get to witness, that transformation. And I remember coming to you on my first pregnancy, and it was sort of later in the game when I came to you, and you spoke so much life into me. And we also did the hypnobirthing course, and that was such a game changer for me, but also my husband, who just thought like, well, you do your thing and I'm going to be over here. And by the time you got to him, he became a believer. He became a believer in understanding that he has a role to play in this too. And it was just, I don't think that's something, it was a priceless moment to be able to have him there, but to have you guiding the both of us through that process and advocating really for our family, our new family. And I'm just forever grateful because knowing my birth story, the story of me coming earthside, and knowing the stories of the women in my family, I was always told that, well, don't even think about, a normal, what we know, what most people would call a normal birth or vaginal birth, because everyone in your family had to have cesareans. That's what I was told. So the point where even my father said, "Yeah, you can wish all you want, but you're gonna have a cesarean." This is coming from my father, but because of the stories that we've heard, and just like there was this long history of cesareans, and I like that you pointed out, cesareans is not like it's not like the end of the world. But I went into my experience wanting, to see if, hey, if we're hearing that our bodies are made for this, let's give my body the chance, and and so, and even to think, okay, not only can my body do this, but my body can do this without medication. That was a whole nother ball game. So just for reference, for on my first pregnancy, or my first birth, my son, I was able to successfully birth him vaginally, and we did have epidural administered. And because my surges weren't progressing enough, we did go in with the Pitocin. You were there for all of this, of course. But we took our time, and that's what I'm so grateful for. That I think, based on how the surges were and all of that, with another doctor, maybe without having a doula, I would have most definitely probably resulted in a cesarean. And so I'm grateful in that this process, we had the time, we had, proper support available to us, to where, I was still able to do what I set out to do, which was to have that vaginal birth. And then I felt like, my goodness, I not only was able to do this again, but do it unmedicated with my daughter. And so when I tell you I felt empowered, it was just like, wow, I can do big and hard things, And when you live your life, many of us have, experiences from our past that kind of take away from that inner power. And, we all have a story, and my story wasn't one that made me feel very empowered or made me feel like I could stand up for myself or advocate in that way. And so to have those experiences and to be almost exactly what I had hoped for, it just made me from that point on feel like, well, you know what? As long as you arm yourself with the knowledge and you have your team, in place, you can really, and your faith in God, that I will accredit that to God as well. You can really do just about anything. There's nothing that is impossible. And so I learned so much from my birthing experiences and was so grateful to the incredible team, that I had with me. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is not about me, but I
Yeah.
just had to share that.
Thank
I
you.
just had to share that with you.
Yeah.
So in sharing that, I would love for you to share maybe one of the toughest challenges that you may
Mhm.
have had in your experience as a doula.
Ooh. So interestingly enough, I would say the toughest challenge could easily be, okay, we had a really long birth, right? Like I've had a
Mhm.
birth, it's like over 30 hours, probably about somewhere around 38 to 40 hours. It did result in a section. It was a very last minute client, like way more last minute than
Okay.
you. You weren't even last minute because we had time to get through
The
5 sessions,
hypnobirthing, right?
hypnobirthing, etcetera, but, that's why I always tell people, like, "Please, if you know you're pregnant, peed
Get
on a
on it.
stick, just see if I'm available,"
Yeah.
and or see if
Yeah.
someone at my agency is available because we need time. We need time to
Right.
build that rapport, and so the time wasn't really there with this client. That was difficult because she turned out to be somebody who I think when you talk about power,
Hmm.
really hasn't found
Yeah. Her
that
phone.
her voice to be able to do it in a way to tap into the power of the access she has to the people and the
Mm.
resources. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so kind of like shuts down when she's overwhelmed. And so, for some people who might be listening, that might be you. Like maybe that's what you do.
Right.
But when you say you want to become a mom and you want to, do this a certain way, you want to break generational curses, whatever that is, that cannot look like doing that without community. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so I
Wow.
love being able to be one of the first, you know, family members, like community
Yes.
members, right? Like that's what I'm here for. And that was hard for me
Mm.
because I'm somewhat of an empath, I think. I can take on certain energy that people give me and show me. It hurts when people hurt, but I also know how to compartmentalize. And so I would say that would have been my toughest
Mm.
difficult thing. But the most toughest and difficult thing I've had to go through was having to caregive for my aging parents
Mm.
and deal with a
And
very transitioning out of a marriage. You know what I mean?
okay.
While I'm trying to keep my business running.
Mm.
That has been very hard, you know? Both of my parents were in this terrible car accident and it just made me like do a full stop and
Mm.
rethink everything. And then a lot of things were exposed, a lot of
Yeah.
things were uncovered about what was going on in my marriage. And I still had a business to run, I still had clients to take care of. So, it taught me that while a pause can happen in a birth, which that's another reason why I do love being at birth. It makes me
Mhm.
slow down too. It makes me kind of like
Yes.
have to focus on one thing at one
The present.
time. It wasn't enough to just have those pauses. Those are great pauses to breathe with the
Mhm.
person and get relaxed and reset your nervous system. But I needed more moments to myself to think through clearly what was going on. And that's what I did when I sat in the, hospital room with my parents. And so I got to really understand like life is particularly short, shorter than we
Mm.
think.
Yeah.
And if you're not already doing what you love to do, what your purpose to do, right? What you feel empowered to do, it can feel even worse, when tough things happen. But thankfully
Yes.
I was grounded in this career and that really helped me get through it, even though it was the toughest thing I had to do.
I'm trying to recall. There's a woman. I don't know if she's like a nutritionist, a dietitian, but she went viral maybe last month. Trying to recall her name, but she said something very powerful that you kind of touched on just now. She said there are three things that basically make up three things that will allow you to live a thriving life or be happy in life. right? Content, whatever you want to call it. And the first one, she said, make sure you have proper sleep hygiene, right? So make sure you get that rest. Make sure you slow down, you get that rest. So when you talk about, spending the time with your parents in the hospital or even with your clients, it helps you to slow down and kind of be more present, right? In your day to day. Then she spoke about chronic stress, and she was saying, we talk so much about self-care, doing the massages, doing the nails and whatever it is, that's self-care, and that's what helps manage stress. But we need to eliminate chronic stress. So chronic stress is going to be, maybe those toxic relationships, where you've done all that you can and still there's no resolve. Okay, let's cut it off, right? Because it's cutting at my life source. So eliminating chronic stress, maybe that job that you hate, it's like, yes, you need to pay the bills, but if it's sucking all the life out of you, it's taking from your soul, then you need to create an exit plan, right? So eliminating chronic step. And then the very last thing that she said we must absolutely do is to find our purpose. Okay, so let me go back to the chronic stress, eliminating chronic stress. She says the reason why it's so important to do that is because if you don't, it will kill you slowly. And then she said, finding your purpose, if you don't do that, it will also kill you slowly. So it was so impactful, her words. And you touched on that, that finding your purpose, because this life really is short. We've dealt with loss, before, well, in the recent past. And it's never, I don't think we ever really get used to it, but it teaches us, you only get one. You only get one here. And so make the most of it. And we really shouldn't be tolerating a lot of the things that we have learned to tolerate. We really shouldn't tolerate it because we have a choice and we have power over those things. And it's time that we act accordingly. Yeah. You know? So yeah, thank you for that. On a lighter note, a brighter note, I would love to know what has been one of your brightest, most rewarding experiences as a doula.
Oh yeah.
As a
So
doula and I'm so sorry, as a doula, but even more so than a doula, but then as a business owner of this thriving business.
yeah, definitely. So I would say entering the grant world back in 2021, I had an opportunity. It was like this random email I got. I also got some clues that some grant funds would be coming down the pipe that I could apply for. Again, I'm a for profit business with a nonprofit heart. And so it
Yeah.
was a very uniquely tailored opportunity that I was eligible to apply for. $200,000, right? Like more money than I'd ever seen in any year of my business or 2 years of my business, really. And I applied. I bet on myself. I don't think
Mhm.
people understood this, but I literally bet on myself. I put my car on collateral to
Wow.
get the money to pay for the grant writer to help me write this grant in 12
Mm.
days.
Wow.
And it was like a federal grant, like huge grant.
Mhm.
So I just like cocooned myself with my business coach. We sat down, we got it done, we dug deep. I probably ignored my kids a lot in that 12 days. I don't know how they got through. They got through and got the grant. And that
Yes.
grant helped me to expand my team, expand my vision of saying, hey, let's put some respect on this career as a
Mhm.
doula. And I think it kind of clicked for me when I realized I was like, wait, without even setting that intention to make a certain amount in that year, I was like, I'm making as much as a teacher, but I'm not working as many
Mm.
hours. There's
Mhm.
something to this,
Right.
right? There's that flexibility. I can still homeschool my kids. And so I have this vision that, if people are called to this work, they know they're supposed to be there at a birth or helping a mom or really have a passion to address, this maternal health crisis, they can do so. And it doesn't have to be a hobby.
Right.
And so I took the funding to create a doula cooperative, which kind of created the foundation for my doula mentorship program that I started back in 2019. And to date, we've mentored over like 66 doulas, getting additional grant funds to help us in that effort. So, yeah.
That is amazing. That is
Yeah.
amazing. When you were talking, I was just thinking about how people may look at, first of all, there's a lot of I think, misinformation about doulas, what they do,
Mm,
why they're important. And so, for you to bet on yourself in that way and to receive those grants to do this work means that doulas are very, they're substantial to our community and they matter. And this is more than just a hobby. It should be more than just a hobby.
mhm.
And so I'm glad and happy to see that you can thrive in a way that you probably didn't even think you could
Right.
for work that is so necessary and so needed. Well, needed and necessary, so needed in our communities for sure.
Mhm.
And so I love that for you. And I think this was what 2021 you said,
2021, I
right?
applied like late November,
Hmm.
found out December 6th. Like it was a
Yes.
short turnaround, right? To know that, okay, I did all these sleepless nights. It was like grant writing is like finals week,
Yeah.
right? And it was intense, but yeah, we got it done.
So my son, my firstborn, was born the summer of 2021. And then
Mhm.
I remember I had reached out to you at some point after all of this, right?
Mhm.
After you got the big news. And I think you had come by the house or something. And then you were sharing all of this. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing news.
Mhm.
And I think right around the time he was turning one, like so many things had started to just like, I think it was just like this domino effect of like, your business just going to this completely different level.
Mhm.
And I was just so happy and pleased that like, okay, now the way you impacted us and we see your value, everyone else is going to see it as well. And just even in how you are mentoring, doulas, now you get to pay it forward in that way as well. It's just, it's amazing. And it makes me feel great that like the experience that I was able to have in my birth, other people, it's literally at your fingertips. Like, and it's not I have to make sure to say that it is also a privilege, right, to be able to have a doula and be able to have a birthing team that can be for you in that way.
Mhm.
It should be second nature. Like, it should be something that is so accessible, like many of the other things that we have in life, but it isn't. And so it is definitely a privilege, but I'm glad to see that there's work being done to make it more and more accessible for mothers and families to have.
Mhm. The reason why I applied for the grant was because I saw the issues with accessibility.
Mm,
I was fortunate enough to work with different organizations and coaches to help me be more visible, to
yes.
market myself, to be, reached. I also had the chance to work with other pregnancy centers to know how the business can run, how do you make it
Mm,
profitable, etc. And that's why I created the MOMCHA program through that grant. So MOMCHA is MOMCHA,
mhm,
and we created the momcha.org website, which is making optimal maternal child health accessible, right?
mhm.
Because we wanted to create a way for doulas to be found on a
Okay.
platform that also connects them to social services for those clients. And so we're educating, we're training doctors, we're training,
That's amazing.
care coordinators, whoever wants to learn more about what a doula is. We made a
Mhm.
curriculum, what do doulas do, so they can know, the support that we provide. So
That is great. I love it. So, yes, I think you touched on this already, but in your current work mentoring other doulas, how do you hope to empower the next generation of doulas?
yeah. So definitely I think what I bring to the table as a mentor is one, I've personally been mentored pretty much all my life,
Mhm.
whether it was my godmother. I have a best friend who's like, I don't want to get this wrong how old she is, but she's at least 5 years older than I am. I have always had like a high school mentor up until last year. She passed, but she's been a great big part of my life.
Okay.
My old boss when I used to work at DCF, still a part of my
Mhm.
life. And I just believe in mentorship. I think
Yes.
it's our way as a people to pass down information, wisdom to those who really need it,
Mhm.
moving forward. And I think the book that really solidified that for me was The Healing Wisdom of Africa. And this
I
emphasis
love
on
that.
mentorship and community and respecting your elders and things like that.
Mhm.
And when you have a situation like I did with caregiving for parents and then eventually losing them, and
Mhm.
now they're, ancestors, I have to come to reckon with, I'm going to be an elder at some point.
Yes.
I'm going to be an
Yes.
ancestor. And so for me, I want them to understand the power in, building their economic status, not because everyone wants to be a millionaire. Sure, everybody wants to be a millionaire if they want to, if they feel like they can handle it. But it's not really that. It's the benefit, the impact that you can have on people's lives when you have your finances together, when you have more to give and to share. So even though through the grants, it was like, oh, I'm a six-figure earner, I was a six-figure spender too.
Okay. So
Where
you're
I had a
giving?
team
Yeah.
where I had to spend that much, right, on the team. And so I think that is important. So while I think health is wealth, I also think I could get closer to a healthier lifestyle when I have wealth too. And so if I'm using it correctly, that's what should happen. I also want them to know we don't want them getting burnt out in this field. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that you have what you need, that you're well rested, that you're taking part in the self-care regimens, that you're cutting out the chronic stress, which is really like, I'm real good at letting go of that stuff now. And having a relaxed nervous system actually helps us to not only create oxytocin for our clients, which is what they need to have a calmer, gentler birth, but it also helps to ground us in this work and be here more long term. Because these stats, you know what I mean, are not going to change overnight. Like we need a growing workforce, a stable, resilient workforce to help manage, right? We're talking about years and years of slavery, right? Hundreds of years of just never really getting what we needed to have to birth our families. And so that's what I'm hoping to give them.
Well, I think any doula, receiving mentorship from you is, they're in good hands, and I could see it. I love when you said, I'm in a for-profit business with a nonprofit heart. And so your heart is in it, and that is of the utmost importance in this type of work. But I love that you point out that you can also do so much more with the wealth. And I often listen to those who are 6 and 7 and 8 figure earners who say, people have this perception of wealth and money as a bad thing, a negative thing, but there's so much more that you can do. And even when it comes to paying it forward, literally paying it forward, there's so many things that you can do with that valuable resource. And so it just makes sense that, when you have it, make the most of it, and also look out for those grants that are out there to help you continue doing the good work that you're doing. So let's get into the impact of having a doula. When a mother is feeling supported and informed, how do you think that impacts their birthing experience?
Absolutely. So I'll take you as an example, for example. So I think our role as a doula is several things, right? I don't think we really define it. We're trained professionally to give emotional, physical, and informational support, right? So when I'm out pitching, talking about what I do, I'm trying to make it clear to people that just as you go on an adventure, you're in another country and you have folks who help guide you, just as you played in football and you're trying to like reach this goal and attain a win, right? You have a coach, you have somebody who can guide you along the way and teach you the things that you don't know, right? The things that you don't know that you don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think what helped is when someone has that unction and they know, like, okay, I may be over my head with this. I may not have the right supports around me. I love my partner. I love my husband or whoever. But I think he's just going to be on his phone the whole time, or he's going to sleep, or he's going to be annoyed that he can't, leave right away. You need to be really thinking about, well, how can I make sure I have what I need at the birth?
Yes.
And who can I have around me to support me? Right. That anxious, grandmother, mother, while we love to have it a family affair as much as we can, some people can't tolerate the anxiety that people give them in that space and still, have their labor progress. Right. And so at my birth, for example, my midwife had to kick out certain people. One, they weren't invited.
Oh, wow.
It was like a football team there. Two, they weren't adding to my relaxation. They were
Yes.
making me more tense and they were nervous and audible about what they were nervous about. Like my ex-grandmother, she was like, grandmother-in-law, she's like, it's time to have this baby. Take her to the hospital. It's their first ever experience of an out-of-hospital birth. So what works in terms of helping someone become a more informed, mother is getting that education beforehand.
Yes.
Prenatal education, preparation, you know? And again, I'm not negating what we know is innate to us, which is we know how to have these babies, right? If we didn't, like, we would not still be here, right? As a race, as a society, like, we would not be here. But our system is so set up in a way where we know it wasn't made for us. And so, because of that, why not have that extra assurance and an insurance that's going to actually work for you and be there for you, right? So, it's the helping to make decisions. Not that you don't have a brain, you do have a brain, but you're probably focused on the sensations in your body, right? And doing and making the best choices for your baby. That's not quite here yet. And so, I help people slow down to think, to process, to ask questions, to give themselves a chance to speak up for themselves, right? And so if it means we're going to ask for more time because, you know, things slow down, but they only slow down because the nurse came in and she was kind of rude and kind of like threw off my client, we're going to ask for more time, you know? So I think all of those things become really important, and choosing the right provider, choosing the right location to give birth. Right? If you go just on the imagery of Hollywood and movies and shows and births in hospitals,
rude awakening,
you would think that it always has to look like that, but it doesn't. It's not even real, and it's not even great acting. It's really not. It's really not. But I think you made the right choice in choosing a location where, you know, head of OB, they're on top of keeping the cesarean rates low. It matters to them. They don't get weird and upset if you ask them about their cesarean rate, right? You had midwives surrounding you and your care, right? Those are things that work. You had a provider who was down to do whatever. As long as you and baby were safe, they were down to wait. They were down to wait after your due date, right? Which isn't post date yet, y'all. Right? It's not post date just because you go past your due date, right?
What would be considered post date?
Closer to 42 weeks.
Okay.
You know, but technically we kind of lean on, people don't like to stretch it past 41 and 3 or 41 and 5 days, you know, 41 weeks and 5 days. But I'm just saying, like, in other parts of the world, even that's not post date, right? But that's a whole nother class if we want to get into why we want to time that out right. But yeah, I think that really helped you tremendously. And just, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to admit, like, I'd rather an expert help me here. Like, let's bring this person in. And for me, it's if people have the means to do it, do it. Like my other clients, they don't have a problem like shelling out, right? And so it's something that even in my culture, I'm working on it. Like, we as a people, especially Black women, we come off with this like strong Black woman trope, and we have to do everything ourselves and all of these things. And I've even had moms whose mothers were that way too, and they try to project that onto their child and say, oh, you don't need anybody, or you don't need help, right? And so when I made the Mom to program, it was intended to fill in that gap. Like, if you didn't have the means or you found out too late about a doula, you can still access a doula, right? They're going to be newly trained, they'll be mentored by me, but you can access a doula here in South Florida. So I'm really like grateful to make it more accessible.
Even, you know, when you shared that the grandma or the mother, whoever that's in the room, family members, but you said specifically your grandmother-in-law, it's time. And she herself had children. So it's like, what are you rushing? But they know that to be normal. And so, of course, they're going to put that on you. And it's something that I find just, I don't know, kind of mind-boggling when you see that. You would think they would want that time, but they don't even know they had the right to request that, you know? And I remember even with my experience, you were like, hey, I think we were going down, we went over the birthing plan, which was great because it just made me start to think of things that I didn't even know that I had the right to think about, right? Things that I didn't know that I could have a decision on. And then even down to the gown. I was like, oh, people do that. They can come in with their own, but you can do whatever you want. They just, you know, they have a system in place, but it doesn't mean you have to follow it. And so it makes you feel so much better knowing, okay, well, I chose this and I picked this out, and, you know, this is how my birthday experience is going to go. It's something that I can take back with me. I can wear in, you know, subsequent births if I choose to. So it's just, that's the empowering thing I think about having a doula and having, you know, choosing your birthing team and being super informed and conscious of those decisions ahead of time, so that you don't have to be thinking about it on the spot, and really positioning yourselves so that the odds can be in your favor. And they were in mine, and I'm still forever grateful for that. What would be something, whether they're pregnant now, whether they're looking to be a mother in the future, what maybe key advice you would give?
I think about if I had to give birth again,
Okay. Yeah.
right, in this day and age, I would really take some caution in terms of what I'm receiving in my eyes, in my ears,
the
you know what I mean, in my spirit, in my heart, because it is so much being thrown out there, right? You have memes and a lot of folks joking about how horrible motherhood can be and all these different things, right? But there is a beauty in mothering, right? That only you can really see at times. And so being willing to take ownership of your own birth story from the start, you know, from the start of like trying to have a baby, right? From conception, even in between that time, what does that look like? If you know and you're hearing that things like obesity and things like that become a challenge during a pregnancy, if you know having diabetes, having it unmanaged, you know, hypertension, all these things can be a hindrance for you, then take your power and do what needs to be done before you get pregnant.
Right.
Because some of those things can get resolved ideally beforehand, but some of those things may linger throughout the pregnancy. And what pregnancy does, I think, to women is helps them see more than just themselves and see the longer term impact of all of their decision making, right? Whether it's the nutrition, whether it's what you're putting in your brain, because all of those things get imprinted, right, on the child. So you want to be very cautious about that. And that goes down to toxic relationships, certain friends, certain like family members you have around. Start living a lifestyle now that would support that pregnancy. Right. And would support your child growing in that environment too. If you can start to make some of those changes, you'll know what to do. You have to tap in, you know, and listen to yourself and really understand, well, what are my real needs here? Right. Am I just going through life just status quo and just being okay with things being mediocre or stressful because that's just what it is? Or am I able to open up my mind and expand the possibilities of being at a restful state? You know, being able to think clearly and make decisions that are good for me and my baby. Can I do that? Am I in a place right now? And if you're not, tap into those resources. You know, and that's what I do. I give resources. I'll connect folks to different community members. I have a strong little network, massage therapist, mental health therapist. Like, we got you, you know, chiropractor, all the things.
I'm thinking back to my experiences. I've met so many people that still are helping me in my journey now, in my journey today as a mother, but even as a professional through you, you know, career coaches, mental health therapists. I mean, it's I love to call you the resource queen because there's so many great contacts. I mean, even pelvic floor therapists. So the list goes on. And it makes such a world of a difference to have someone or just people in your corner that can help you for different reasons in your mothering journey, but even beyond that, motherhood journey and beyond. So again, I'm going to always say thank you because it's done so much for me and my family. And so thank you so much for your time. Thank you for giving such value to the audience who may be watching or listening. And we look forward to seeing more that you'll be doing to impact the community. And to follow you, where can they go?
Yeah. So you can follow Metro Mommy Agency at I Can Doula on Instagram. That's I Can DOULA, one word. I'm also on Facebook as well. You can search, I think it's at Metro Mommy Agency on Facebook. But yeah, we'd love to connect, and you can visit our site at www.metromommyagency.com. Yeah, and also if you have someone who's looking for a doula here in South Florida, my agency also offers support through the MomCha program, MOMCHA.org.
So happy that you you came on. And as always, we're just glad that you're here to join us. So in this episode, we saw Esther McCant's pathway to power, and we can't wait to share more incredible stories with you. Make sure you stay tuned, and as always, happy healing.